The year is 1987. The setting is the Neuquén province of Argentinian Patagonia, a vast wind-swept landscape of red dust, scrub brush, and silence. For Guillermo Heredia, a local rancher, it was just another day tending to his land at the Las Overas farm. But as he walked across a familiar stretch of sun-baked earth, something caught his eye that didn't belong. Protruding from the dirt was a massive cylindrical object. To a layman, it looked like a fallen, petrified tree trunk, weathered, heavy, and seemingly unremarkable in a region known for its ancient geology. But Heredia was curious. He looked closer at the log and realized the texture wasn't bark. It was mineralized marrow. He wasn't looking at a tree. He was looking at a bone. Heredia contacted the Carmen Funes Municipal Museum in Plaza Huincul. When the paleontologists arrived, led by the legendary Dr. José Bonaparte, they realized the rancher's log was actually a tibia, a shin bone, of such gargantuan proportions that it defied their existing maps of biology. The official excavation began in 1989, and it quickly became an exercise in heavy engineering. This wasn't a delicate brush and dental pick operation. To reveal the rest of the creature, the team had to move tons of Huincul Formation rock. What they found next was even more staggering. A series of dorsal vertebrae, the bones of the mid-back. One single vertebra stood over 1.6 meters tall, nearly the height of a grown man, and weighed over 2 tons. The team stared in silence. They weren't just looking at a large dinosaur. They were looking at a creature that had reached the theoretical ceiling of what gravity would allow a terrestrial animal to be. The conditions were brutal. The Patagonian wind whipped sand into their eyes, and the heat was relentless. But as they unearthed the sacrum and the ribs, the sheer scale of the animal began to take shape. They were documenting a Titanosaur, a group of long-necked giants, but this specimen was the patriarch of them all. In 1993, Bonaparte and his colleague Rodolfo Coria officially published their findings. They named it Argentinosaurus huinculensis. The name was a tribute to the nation that had guarded these secrets for 95 million years, and the small town of Plaza Huincul that had supported the dig. This discovery fundamentally shifted our understanding of the Cretaceous period. It proved that while the northern hemisphere had the famous T-Rex and Triceratops, the southern hemisphere, specifically South America, was the true land of the giants. It was an ecosystem of extremes, where the grass-eaters were as long as 3 school buses and weighed as much as a fleet of Boeing 737s. Guillermo Heredia's accidental stroll in 1987 had opened a door into a lost world, proving that beneath the quiet soil of Patagonia lay the remains of the largest engine of flesh and bone to ever walk the earth. How do you measure a ghost? That is the primary challenge paleontologists face with Argentinosaurus. Unlike some dinosaurs where we have nearly complete skeletons, the giant of Argentina is known from a series of massive fragments. To reconstruct it, scientists must become part mathematician, part detective, and part artist. They use a process called allometric scaling, comparing the known bones of Argentinosaurus to its more complete smaller relatives like Patagotitan or Saltosaurus. The numbers that emerge from these calculations are nothing short of mythological. Let's start with the length. Estimates generally place a full-grown Argentinosaurus at between 30 and 35 meters long. To put that in perspective, if you stood one at the goal line of an American football field, its snout would reach past the 35-yard line. If it walked down a city street, its body would span the width of 3 standard townhouses. But length is only half the story. The true measure of a giant is its mass, the sheer weight it exerted on the earth with every step. Early estimates were conservative, but as our understanding of sauropod biology improved, the numbers climbed. Modern consensus puts a healthy adult at anywhere from 70 to 90 metric tons. Some ambitious models even suggest 100 tons. To visualize 90 tons, imagine 15 African bush elephants stacked together. Or perhaps more fittingly, imagine the weight of a mobile home or a small space shuttle. This was 90,000 kilograms of living, breathing tissue. Every time this animal took a step, the force traveling through its footpads was enough to create localized seismic tremors. It didn't just walk, it announced its presence to the geology of the Cretaceous. The height is equally imposing. While Argentinosaurus wasn't a high browser like the Brachiosaurus, which had longer front legs to reach the tops of trees, it still stood about 15 to 16 meters tall when its neck was raised. That is the equivalent of a 5-story building. Its chest alone was so broad that a grown man could stand upright inside its ribcage with room to spare. Why did it get this big? In biology, size is often an evolutionary arms race. Being this massive meant that once an Argentinosaurus reached adulthood, it was effectively immune to predation. No carnivore on Earth, no matter how hungry or desperate, could take down a 90-ton wall of muscle single-handedly. Its size was its suit of armor. However, being a giant comes with a cost. A creature of this magnitude would need to consume hundreds of thousands of calories every single day just to maintain its basic functions. It was a biological vacuum cleaner, moving its long neck in a wide arc to strip entire groves of conifers and ferns of their foliage without moving its heavy torso. It lived a life of constant, slow-motion consumption, dictated by the relentless demands of its own incredible dimensions. Nature's solution to the problem of extreme weight is a paradox. To make a giant strong, you must first make it light. When paleontologists first cleared the sandstone from the vertebrae of Argentinosaurus, they noticed something peculiar. The bones weren't solid blocks of calcium. Instead, they were riddled with deep, complex cavities known as pleurocoels. These weren't signs of disease, they were a revolutionary design feature. Much like the honeycomb structure of a modern airplane wing, these hollowed-out bones provided maximum structural integrity with minimum weight. These air sacs were likely connected to a sophisticated respiratory system similar to that of modern birds. This meant that while the animal looked solid from the outside, it was essentially honeycombed with air, allowing it to reach its massive size without becoming a literal prisoner of gravity. Then there is the matter of the limbs. To support 90 tons, the legs of Argentinosaurus couldn't be angled like those of a lizard or a crocodile. They had to be shifted directly underneath the body, functioning like the marble pillars of a Greek temple. These legs were graviportal, built specifically for weight-bearing rather than speed. The bones were thick, dense, and lacked the marrow cavities found in smaller animals, turning the limbs into solid struts of biological stone. But the real engineering marvel was the suspension bridge of the spine. The neck and tail of Argentinosaurus acted as counterweights to one another. To keep this massive horizontal beam from snapping, the dinosaur possessed a series of oversized ligaments that acted like high-tension steel cables. These ligaments stored elastic energy, meaning that moving the neck didn't require constant muscular effort. It was a self-balancing system of tension and compression. Perhaps the most mind-boggling challenge was the internal plumbing. How do you get blood from a heart on the ground up to a brain 5 stories in the air? This would require a heart of incredible size, perhaps weighing over 400 kilograms, and blood pressure so high it would rupture the vessels of any human. Scientists believe Argentinosaurus may have had muscular pumps in its neck or a series of one-way valves to prevent blood from rushing backward when it lowered its head to drink. Finally, we have to consider the feet. A 90-ton animal cannot walk on toes. Argentinosaurus walked on massive fleshy pads that acted like shock absorbers. These pads distributed the animal's weight over a larger surface area, preventing it from sinking into the soft river mud of the Cretaceous floodplains. Every step was a calculated distribution of force, a rhythmic dance of physics that allowed the largest land animal in history to navigate its world with surprising grace. Imagine standing in a humid, subtropical floodplain. To your left, a massive river snakes through the landscape, fed by the rising Andes Mountains. The air is thick, smelling of damp earth and resin. The forests aren't made of oaks or maples, but of towering conifers, ginkgos, and carpets of ferns. In this world, Argentinosaurus wasn't just an inhabitant, it was a geological force. A creature this size didn't just eat breakfast, it processed a forest. An adult Argentinosaurus likely needed to consume over 100,000 calories every single day. To achieve this, it functioned like a biological harvester. Using its long neck to reach areas other herbivores couldn't, it would strip entire groves of their needles and cones. It didn't chew, it didn't have the molars for it. Instead, it swallowed its food whole, letting a massive fermenting gut and swallowed stomach stones, gastroliths, do the heavy lifting of digestion. But life wasn't just a peaceful buffet. Even a 90-ton titan had enemies. Sharing this ecosystem was one of the most terrifying predators to ever walk the earth, Mapusaurus rosae. While a single Mapusaurus, at 12 meters long, was significantly smaller than an adult Argentinosaurus, evidence suggests these carnivores may have hunted in packs. Imagine the scene, a coordinated strike by 5 or 6 of these predators. They wouldn't try to kill the giant instantly, that would be impossible. Instead, they likely used flesh-grazing tactics, darting in to take bites out of the giant's massive flanks and legs, waiting for blood loss and infection to do the work. It was a slow, brutal game of attrition. The most vulnerable stage of an Argentinosaurus's life, however, was the beginning. These giants started as eggs no larger than a grapefruit or a soccer ball. Thousands of them would be laid in communal nesting grounds. Upon hatching, a baby Argentinosaurus was a defenseless morsel for any passing predator. Their survival strategy was R selection, laying so many eggs that by sheer probability a few would survive to reach that untouchable adult size. To see a herd of these animals on the move would have been a sensory assault. The ground would literally thrum under your feet from kilometers away. The sound of their vocalizations, likely low-frequency rumbles that could travel vast distances, would vibrate in your very chest. They were the undisputed monarchs of the southern hemisphere, turning the Cretaceous landscape into a theater of the magnificent. When we look at Argentinosaurus, we aren't just looking at a successful animal. We are looking at a biological boundary. Scientists often refer to this as the upper size limit. In physics, the square-cube law dictates that if you double an object's size, its surface area triples, but its volume, and therefore its weight, quadruples. Eventually, you reach a point where bone, no matter how reinforced, cannot support the mass above it. Argentinosaurus was dancing right on that edge. If it had been 20% larger, its femur might have shattered simply from the act of standing up. This animal represents the absolute peak of what carbon-based life can achieve on a planet with Earth's gravity. But being a titan is a double-edged sword. While their size made them invulnerable as adults, it made them incredibly fragile as a species. A 90-ton animal has a slow life. They take decades to reach maturity. They reproduce slowly, and they require a staggering amount of food. If the climate shifts even slightly, if a drought kills off the conifer forests or a volcanic event chokes the air with ash, the biggest animals are always the first to starve. They have no buffer. By the end of the Cretaceous, around 66 million years ago, the world was changing. The continents were drifting, the sea levels were fluctuating, and the lush floodplains of the Huincul Formation were disappearing. While the famous asteroid impact is the smoking gun for the extinction of the dinosaurs, the titans like Argentinosaurus were already facing a world that was becoming too small and too resource-poor to support them. Today, the legacy of Argentinosaurus lives on in the dirt of Patagonia and in the halls of museums like the Museo Carmen Funes, where a full-scale reconstruction allows us to walk beneath its belly. It serves as a humbling reminder of what life is capable of when given enough time and the right environment. We often think of evolution as a march toward intelligence, but for tens of millions of years, evolution was a march toward magnitude. Argentinosaurus was the crowning achievement of that era. It was a creature that turned the landscape into its footstool, a mountain of meat and spirit that proved that for a brief moment in Earth's history, gravity was just a suggestion. As we close this 50-minute journey, we're left with one haunting realization. We live in a world of small things. To truly understand the Earth, we must remember the time when the ground shook, the trees trembled, and the horizon was owned by the Argentinian lizard.